Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I have been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we continue to move forward through yet another season together. As always, you can find our 100% free, 24/7 boots on the ground coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars when you follow us on social media such as Facebook and Twitter, at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. All right, folks, welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. I, of course, am your host, John Shipley, and today we are doing our weekly predictions podcast. We will give you our final thoughts on the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Houston Texans, set for this Sunday at Everbank Stadium. Now, this is, I'd say, a fairly big game. You know, the Jaguars, if they win, advance to 2-1 and put the Texans kind of firmly behind them. Not to the point where it's an unreachable level, obviously. You know, they've been behind them further and have come back. But a win would make the Jaguars 2-1 and the Texans 0-3. And folks, the Texans have an absolutely brutal schedule. Playing a first place schedule this season, the Texans have, games against Buffalo, Baltimore, Kansas City. I believe they have San Francisco still on the docket. I believe they have Seattle still on the docket. I mean, Houston's going to face some tough teams. And I guarantee you Houston is seeing this as a, we can't start 0-3 type game. Now, on the flip side, if the Jaguars lose, then they are 1-2, going all the way to the West Coast the following week to face a hot San Francisco 49ers team, and then they have the Kansas City Chiefs the very next week. Neither of those, of course, is exactly ideal, I would say. So, for the Jaguars, I think, it is key to not just win this game, but to do it decisively. To send a message to the rest of the AFC South that the lowly Jaguars of before are gone. Now, this is the Jaguars' only AFC South game in the first 2 months of the season. They don't play another one for quite some time. The division will still be there for the potential taking the second half of the season. But this is the Jaguars' chance to reintroduce themselves to the AFC South. And they're doing so against a Houston Texans team that they've had a lot of struggles against. A Texans team that, outside of a Jaguars win in Houston in 2023, has really kind of dominated the Jaguars during C.J. Stroud's short time under center for the Texans. The Jaguars are 1-3 against the Texans with Stroud under the helm. That win at Houston 2 years ago was the only real success the Jaguars have had, and that one came right down to the wire, and it took a career game from Josh Hines-Allen, who had, I believe, 12 pressures, 2.5 sacks, something crazy like that, and a really big game from Trevor Lawrence, one of the best games of his career, in my opinion. And now the Jaguars have the chance to flip the narrative. The Texans have not just won the AFC South in the last 2 seasons. The Texans have steamrolled the Jaguars' chances of winning the division. So, ultimately, I think, if you're the Jaguars, this is a game that you're looking at as not just a way to get ahead of a rival, as a way to not just, make some progress in the early stages of the AFC South race, but to show teams like the Texans and like the Indianapolis Colts and like the Tennessee Titans that this is not the Jaguars of the past few years, that they won't simply be bullied. They will be the hammer, not the nail. And that is the biggest reason I'm picking the Jaguars on Sunday. I'm picking the Jaguars 24-13. I think that, obviously Houston has a really strong defense. They have, in my opinion, the most physical secondary in the NFL. One of the best defenders in the entire NFL, and Derek Stingley. They have a blue chip corner. They have two blue chip edge rushers. I'd say, you talk about elite edge rushing duos. Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker are up there, and Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter are up there as well. So between Hunter, Anderson, and Stingley, three truly elite players for a Houston Texans defense that is set to go up against a Jaguars offense that has been scoring, that has definitely made strides and has definitely been more productive in a lot of ways from a volume sense, but is also an offense that is still dealing with penalties, an offense that has turned the ball over 3 times, and an offense that I believe leads the NFL in drops right now. That said, there are some aspects of the Jaguars offense I think are encouraging against the Houston defense. One, I think the Jaguars will be able to run the ball. I've long said it. I just think 4-man fronts leave you a bit suspect. 2 runs, to me, a 4-3 defense, it just creates easier angles, easier blocks, easier combo blocks for offensive linemen. I've been in more of a favor of a 5-man front for, some time now. And that's the biggest reason. I just believe the spacing allows you to more effectively stop the run. And that is the big issue that I've seen from the Texans defense against the run. Or at very least, the big issue that they had against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the other night. With the natural spacing in their defensive linemen, and they don't have a true, clogger against the run, I simply think the Jaguars will be able to run the ball. I think that the Jaguars' rushing success over the last 2 weeks is not a mirage. I'm not sure I can put my finger exactly on what Liam Cohen does to magically transform the worst running game in football in the NFL to an incredibly productive one in back-to-back seasons with different franchises, different players entirely. But whatever he's done, it's working so far. Jaguars are the best rushing team in football, right now, and ultimately they're a team that has been able to establish that identity on the ground. Travis Etienne has had back-to-back big weeks. Bayshao Tune, you're starting to see him kind of come alive. Between the stable of running backs, the scheme, and a much improved offensive line, I think the Jaguars will be able to run the ball. The other aspect of the offense, I actually like the Jaguars' offensive tackles this weekend. Anton Harrison has played really well against the Texans in his career. Gave up 2 pressures in 2 games against the Texans last year. He, in most instances against Will Anderson, has kept Will Anderson in check. And Walker Little, I think, also has just a matchup that fits his play style more this week than he had last week with Trey Hendrickson. And then finally, the defense. They've created a league-leading 6 takeaways. C.J. Stroud is 27th out of 34th in EPA per drop back right now. Nick Caley just doesn't seem like he really has the juice. And meanwhile, I think the Jaguars' defensive line can get after C.J. Stroud. I think the different pressure looks that the Jaguars throw can disrupt a really, struggling offensive line. And ultimately, I just think the Jaguars can throw enough at C.J. Stroud to continue to make his recent slump extend for another week. So I have the Jaguars winning this one. We'll see how right I am. We'll see if they truly do take control of the AFC South race and show the Houston Texans who the new Jacksonville Jaguars are. Thank you guys for listening. My name is John Shipley. We'll be back next time.